Hey guys, it's time to get back in the car and head on out to Riverside for the second part of our virtual field trip. Looking forward to a great time with you. Let's go. Well guys, we are at Riverside National Cemetery. In 8th grade, we go to Arlington National Cemetery usually. What a lot of people don't know though is there are multiple national cemeteries in the United States, and Riverside is actually the largest national cemetery in the United States, larger than Arlington. And we're going to visit some important places here today and pay our respects to the men and women who have served this great nation. Okay guys, we're coming up to our first stop at Riverside National Cemetery, and there's a couple memorials here we're going to visit. You can see the mountains across the way, snow-capped here in the beautiful Orange County early spring. And right over by those mountains, just across the road there, is the March Reserve Air Base, which is appropriate. So we still have men and women serving our country from that base just across the road. And we're gonna go visit a couple memorials here. As you can imagine, there are funerals here every day, 21 gun salutes throughout the day, and the flags are always at half-mast in honor of the dead who are buried here. And right now, guys, you'll see that we're at our first memorial stop. And I'm gonna show you the writing here. It is the Veterans Memorial, dedicated to eulogize the sacrifice of American veterans. I'll let you read the rest. It's a beautiful yet heart-rending memorial. Okay guys, there's a lot of special places here, and this is an incredibly special spot. This is the Congressional Medal of Honor Memorial, and the Congressional Medal of Honor is given to recipients who have distinguished themselves conspicuously by gallantry and intrepidity at the risk of their life, above and beyond the call of duty. There are names etched onto the walls of this memorial that represent incredible stories of sacrifice. I always get choked up coming here. This is Army, Navy, Air Force, and Marines. All have members who've received this medal. Many of them received it posthumously, meaning after they died. Many of them sacrificed their lives for the sake of their comrades and for the sake of our freedom. And we're gonna go inside and the walls here and take a look at a couple names. Just a couple of the great stories of people who've given us the nation that we have. Okay, you probably recognize this name right here, but notice there's a junior at the end. This is Theodore Roosevelt Jr., who was the son of the President of the United States, one of two sons of American presidents who have received the Congressional Medal of Honor. He was involved in the first wave of attack and invasion on Normandy, the D-Day invasion that eventually ended up getting us the victory in World War II. He was ahead of his men, putting his own life at risk. He ended up dying of a heart attack on the beach there, but not until after everyone had noticed his heroism in leading his men. The Jeep that he had said Rough Rider on it because his father, Theodore Roosevelt Sr., had been part of the Rough Riders in the Spanish-American War, and he was proud of his dad. He received the Congressional Medal of Honor in 1944. He died there on the beaches of Normandy after leading his men to a successful invasion on the first wave attack on D-Day. And he was promoted to general right there on the beach. And this is very interesting right here. We're at the Spanish-American War, the war that liberated Cuba from the tyrannical control of the Spanish monarchy in 1898. There's a lot of names listed here, but look at this. As we come to the end, you'll see at the very bottom it says Theodore Roosevelt. The reason he's listed here is because he actually did not receive the Medal of Honor until 2001. He'd been recommended for this award because, like his son, who later would do the same thing, he advanced ahead of his men. He was the first to reach the enemy trenches, where he killed a Spanish soldier and rallied his men to go on up to Kettle Hill to get the high point overlooking San Juan Harbor. But after the battle, he made waves because his men had the wrong uniforms, they had diseased food, they didn't have the supplies they needed, and worried about his soldiers, he spoke out. He spoke out demanding that his soldiers receive the correct treatment that they were due. And that offended some people higher up, but he was more concerned about doing the right thing than the thing that would bring him glory. And eventually he did receive the Congressional Medal of Honor in 2001, 103 years after his actions in the Spanish-American War. Now, as you can see here, guys, the Congressional Medal of Honor awards go back to the American Civil War and then continues on to, of course, the Spanish-American War, the Mexican campaign, all the way up to World War II, the Korean War, and Vietnam. And here we have Michael Monsoor from the War on Terror, born in Long Beach, California, resident of Garden Grove, law enforcement, and called to duty in Iraq. I'm going to read to you about how Michael Monsoor showed sacrifice and love for his fellow comrades and servicemen. Due to expected enemy action, the officer in charge repositioned Monsoor with his automatic heavy machine gun in the direction of the enemy's most likely avenue of approach. He placed him in a small confined sniper hide site between two SEAL snipers on an outcropping of the roof, which allowed the 3 SEALs maximum coverage of the area. He was located closest to the egress route and out of the sight of the sniper. While vigilantly watching for enemy activity, an enemy fighter hurled a hand grenade onto the roof from an unseen location. The grenade hit Monsoor in the chest and bounced onto the deck. He immediately leapt to his feet and yelled "grenade" to alert his teammates. But they could not evacuate the sniper hide site in time to escape harm. Without hesitation and showing no regard for his own life, he threw himself onto the grenade, smothering it to protect his teammates who were lying in close proximity. The grenade detonated as he came down on top of it, mortally wounding him. Michael Monsoor from Orange County, American hero, loved his neighbors, sacrificed his life for them. There's so many stories of heroism and sacrifice here, and some of the people who are buried here are noted. I'll pause here for a moment and let you read about Mitchell Page. Watch out for those sandals. We are at the taco station. This is a 1950s former Shell gas station that now serves some pretty darn good Mexican American food. I will enter. It is my mission to eat my way through Southern California. I love that this is a repurposed gas station. I love that too. Lunch. Riverside has some of the most beautiful architecture, and this dates back to the time in which Riverside was the wealthiest city in America. And right over here we have the art museum, the Riverside Art Museum. And this building used to be the YWCA, and it was designed by Julia Morgan, who also did Hearst Castle up in Central California, which was the largest home in the state for the newspaper magnate William Randolph Hearst. Looks like a citrus crate label. Beautiful, beautiful architecture. And if we come over here, right before we get to the Mission Inn, we can see this pagoda, which is here to remind people that once upon a time there was a Chinatown in Riverside, and it was located right in this very area. And that's why you have this Chinese pagoda in the middle of everything. And just beyond, you can see the Mission Inn, which was established by Frank Miller in the early 20th century. We'll go there next. Have to do pay parking here, but that's an appropriate parking spot, 714, since that's where I come from. And we're going to cross the street right here to the Mission Inn, which is generally considered to be the largest Mission Revival style building in the United States. And Mission Revival style was popular in the early part of the 20th century, kind of a romanticized time period for the missions as people look back on the mission era of Spanish settlement in California and wanted to build things that looked like it would have been from the mission era. And the Mission Inn was built between 1902 and 1932 by Frank Miller. And he built it, like I said, over a 30-year time period. These buttresses, which almost look like flying buttresses, are kind of supposed to be flying buttresses, but they're just decorative. They don't actually support the building. If you look, you can see where the concrete was formed by wood beams on the side there, but it does look very, Spanish, for lack of a better term, which was very popular in the early years of the 20th century in California. Now, really interesting, Frank Miller collected antiques, even pieces of buildings, whatever he could find that was historic and seemed pretty cool to him, he would buy all around the world. He'd bring it back here and make it part of his hotel. And this chain right here is an example of that. All these chains we're walking past were salvaged from the San Francisco Bay. These are ship anchor chains that belonged to ships that had arrived for the gold rush. But when ships came to California for the gold rush, ship captains, the entire ship crews would abandon the ships, and eventually those ships would rot and have to be destroyed or fade into the bay. But the ships' anchor chains remain, and that's what we're looking at right here. He purchased those, and you'll also see as we walk along here ironwork and metal pieces that were purchased by Frank Miller on his visits to Mexico. He would actually go to different villages and he would tell the people, if you've got anything to sell, or rather his agents who would represent him would travel to these villages, say, bring it to us, anything interesting, ironwork, you name it. And they brought back all kinds of metal pieces that were built into this inn. In fact, on the inside of this building, on the inside of the courtyard here, there is actually a chapel, and that chapel has an altar in it that was completely reconstructed, taken from Mexico, reconstructed, and put in place here at the Mission Inn. And the thing is gigantic, but it's really, really beautiful. Here's an example of one of those iron pieces, and here's another one. Notice that they don't match because it was whatever the villagers would bring to Miller's representatives and sell to him, they would purchase. And it doesn't all go together, but it's really interesting. And this right here is the corredor, or the walkway leading us to the Mission Inn. If you look up here, it is actually an El Camino Real bell. Those are all along the 5 freeway, even in downtown Tustin. They were put up in the early years of the 20th century to mark the mission route, the El Camino Real, that used to go from mission to mission. Of course, the El Camino Real did not come anywhere near the Mission Inn, but again, trying to keep with that romantic mission imagery, they put one of those mission bells here. I think we should have one at Calvary, since we are right along the El Camino Real. I think it'd be very appropriate for us to have one. So here we are right outside the Mission Inn entrance, and you can see, if you look beyond my shoulder here, that it's closed. You can still see the Mission arch behind me with the bells. And then right over here, you can see, if you look closely, an antique bell from China that was purchased by Miller and brought here to the United States. Hopefully someday you'll get a chance to visit here if you haven't already. Some of you have been here. Maybe you can come out here on a family vacation, or maybe just take a tour. They actually offer tours, behind the scenes tours, which are really cool and really interesting. I'm gonna show you a few last images of the Mission Inn, and then we're gonna head back to Orange County. Well, I'm back home in Santa Ana. Had a great time in Riverside. I forgot to mention a couple interesting stories about the Mission Inn. One, Thomas Edison was one of the famous visitors who went to the Mission Inn, and while he was there, one of Frank Miller's macaws bit his finger, which hurt quite a bit. Another famous visitor to the Mission Inn was President Taft, a gigantic man. Not making fun, he was a large man, so am I. And he weighed over 300 pounds, and Frank Miller actually created a special chair for him. Asked me to show you the picture of my kids and I sitting in that same chair, because it's still at the Mission Inn. Anyway, it was a gigantic chair, and President Taft was insulted. He wanted to leave in a huff, but finally he did sit down in the chair. A lot of famous visitors there, including President Reagan, President Nixon, and as you already know, President Theodore Roosevelt. Well, as I said, back in Santa Ana, you can hear the fireworks going off in my neighborhood right now. I'm about to eat one of those delicious navel oranges from Riverside, and soon it will be Valencia orange season, which of course is the orange of Santa Ana, the orange that was developed or hybridized right here. And so before I say goodbye from this virtual field trip, I'm going to go ahead and give you a couple last images from the trip. Oh my gosh, this is so much better than the stuff they give you in the store, sell you in the store. That's good. That's really good. Till next time, guys, God bless you. I love you, and have a great day.